Hello, everyone. My name is Mel with What School Could Be, and I'd like to welcome you to a very special July Big Think. 10 years ago, Most Likely to Succeed introduced the world to a bold vision of education, and much of it was told through the eyes of youth learners. So tonight, we're going to bring three of those voices back, and they're not in high school anymore. One's a scientist and an educator. Another one is working towards a career in forensics and national security. And one is traveling the world working on movie sets. So we're going to sit down live with them to ask what stayed with them in terms of deeper learning, what shaped their journeys, and maybe what are their thoughts on what happens when education actually centers students. So without further ado, let me introduce each one of these very special guests. So in Most Likely to Succeed, Samantha Fiallo was leading and directing a student production. She brought together a team to create something bigger than the sum of its parts. Sam has obtained her Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Pepperdine University, where she studied how tiny ferns in the Santa Monica Mountains were able to survive without water for many months. Upon graduation, she received a grant from the National Science Foundation, which she took to UCSB to fund her PhD thesis work on mitochondria in the Joel Rothman lab. And in addition to research, Sam has fallen in love with teaching and education. And so far, she has designed and taught 2 project-based learning courses, and one day aspires to become a professor as well as run her own research lab. Hi, Sam. How are you doing?
Hi, good. Thanks. That just inspired me. That motivated me to keep going. Thank you for the intro.
Amazing. Well, we're going to bring on 2 more people, 2 more guests, and we'll introduce Brian Cesson right now. So Brian was a project leader in Most Likely to Succeed. He was guiding a team that designed a moving part for a wheel to physically model why civilizations rise and fall. Today, he's a filmmaker based in Los Angeles, and Brian cultivated his passion for filmmaking at High Tech Middle and High Tech High, later earning a film and TV directing degree from UCLA's prestigious film school, where he helmed several short films and a web series. But since graduating, his industry experience as a crew member spans a diverse range of high-profile projects, which you may have heard of, including Barbie, Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu, Black Adam, Thor, Love and Thunder, and F1, the movie. And his work has taken him to locations throughout the US, New Zealand, and South Africa. So here's Brian.
Hey,
Brian,
Mel.
where in the world are you right now?
I'm in Los Angeles. It's a much more boring place than the other places you listed, but I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll bring in our last guest right now. So Scout Whiteley, she wasn't followed as a main character in the same way that Sam and Brian were, but her 4th grade parent-teacher conference, where her facial expression kind of carried that unspoken question, what is school really for, set the tone for the entire film. And what many don't know is that she later went to High Tech High herself. So today, Scout is a 22-year-old student at Utah Valley University studying digital forensics and national security studies. She's found the program much more intriguing than the 4th grade math class, which was featured in Most Likely to Succeed. So Scout enjoys tending to her beloved bees and hiking with her dog Arlo in the mountains. So we'll bring out Scout. Hi, Scout. Welcome.
Hi, guys. Oh my gosh. To see that clip from the movie, I'm like, hopefully I'm not as grumpy as I once was, but happy to be here.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know, it's surreal to be sitting here with the 3 of you and thinking about this moment. When we first met you, you were young students kind of navigating your own learning journeys, and most likely sparked so many conversations about how school should prepare youth for the future. And now we get to sit here with all of you a decade later as more or less the living proof of the answers to these questions. So really excited to be here with all of you. Yeah. So let's maybe rewind for a second here. Sam, maybe we'll start with you. I know that all of you are in such exciting chapters of your lives right now, and I'd love for all of you to kind of take us there for a minute. So what is life looking like for you all today? Maybe what projects you're working on, kind of what's bringing you joy. Yeah, and just share out where life has taken you.
I love that you asked what's bringing me joy, because my work does bring me a lot of joy these days. I'm a PhD student, and I'm kind of finishing up. I'm a year away, but my focus has been mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, but it does so much more than that. And I use little microscopic nematodes to study these cellular dynamics. But really what I like is that it's hands-on. I'm in the lab every day, just answering questions the way I want to. And then apart from that, I'm at a university, so I've had a lot of opportunities to teach and spread my enthusiasm for mitochondria. I saw that some of my students are in the chat. Hi. But yeah, I've been able to teach a couple project-based courses and try to spread the joy of lab learning and science. I promise it's fun. But like you said, I'm in Santa Barbara, so I'm also going to the beach a lot at the same time. But that's what I've been up to.
Just a quick follow-up, Sam, before we move on to Brian. When you're designing these project-based courses for your high schoolers, do you ever find yourself thinking about what you loved as a high schooler or what you needed as a student yourself?
Yes, I do. And I think a lot about like what any other extra things that now looking back, I wish I could have added. Like a lot of my teaching is informed by the way my research is going right now. So for example, like I have a lot of a need for bioinformatics and computational work these days. And so I taught a course on how to use bioinformatics and how to code, how to use Python and things like that. That's kind of what I'm thinking when I design the courses.
That's amazing. Thanks, Sam. Brian, how about you?
Yeah, I love your question as well. Thank you about what brings me joy. Yeah, for me, I'm not doing anything nearly as important as what Sam's doing. I'm just making movies. But the thing that brings me the most joy is being on set. There's just something about like that energy when you're on set, that kind of gets sustained even throughout like the 12 to 16 hours that you work on set, and you have all these people coming together towards a common goal, which is creating that movie or that TV show. So I just love doing that, and that's the thing that brings me joy. So I've just been working on that. Like you mentioned earlier, I went to film school and shot a lot of projects during film school. Ever since I graduated, I've been working as a crew member on these other projects like TV shows and movies, and I've been trying to learn as much as I can from being on set and from kind of stalking the director, seeing what they do, and then hopefully take that that knowledge into my own projects sometime in the near future.
That's very cool. So I'm kind of curious, Brian, because it sounds like you've worked on all different sizes of sets. And so what is that like in terms of the collaboration aspect of it? Is there still something that feels familiar or that's similar that you use and do no matter what size of the crew that you work with?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference I would say is that the bigger the project, the more specialized every position becomes. When you're on a smaller project, like you probably heard this before, you're wearing many hats, whether you're a director or cinematographer or whatever, you're doing a lot of other jobs rather than just yours. But the bigger the project, theoretically, the more budget you have, and then the more people you have that can just focus on the one thing. So like on these bigger projects, like you have one person whose entire job is to like bring a drink to set, like it gets really, really specialized. And there's a reason for it because it's more efficient if you have the money. But what's cool is I think no matter what project, like what scale of project you're working on, you still have people that are really passionate, and that kind of gets exuded from everyone, and you kind of feel it. And one of the places I felt that the most actually are like any of the Star Wars projects I've been on. Like the people that work on the Star Wars projects, they're like huge Star Wars fans, like the biggest Star Wars fans, and they get to do that for their job, and so just their energy is always intoxicating.
It's amazing. Thanks, Brian. Scout, I'm going to toss it over to you.
Brian, I love that you were once in front of the camera and now the one operating. That's so awesome. Yeah, I'm going into my last semester studying forensics with a minor in national security studies. So I'm in Utah and should be finished in December, hopefully is my goal. And yes, Sam's like, this is crazy because I probably saw her last when I was in 4th grade. So it's wild. Time has flown by for me too. But my goal, yeah, here is a plane crash I was on. I don't know if everyone can see those photos I'm seeing, but I have been working with the sheriff's department in their forensics. This is an arson case I was on, which is kind of fun. I was working with the sheriff's department in their forensics unit for a while, and then kind of honed in on my specialty with digital forensics, which kind of has a tighter hand with national security studies. So that's kind of been my main focus for like the last 4 years or so. But Yeah, that's what's bringing me joy right now. And then beekeeping. I'm in California for the summer, so keeping bees is my side hobby.
That's so awesome. So I'm gonna actually ask you about those photos. So are those lab situations? Or are those actual like jobs that you were on
Yeah.
as a part of your schooling?
Yeah, all of those. So that was when I was working with the sheriff's department last year. So those are all real crime scenes. But we did do a little bit of lab work. Typically, most of the work we were doing was just processing phones in the lab. Unlike Sam, my brain does not have the scientific, processing that I wish I did have for lab sciences. But yeah, so a lot of my work is going into a crime scene, collecting the evidence around whatever crime it is, and then bringing it back to the lab to be processed. So a lot of what forensic scientists do is once the information is processed, they're actually the ones representing it in court for whatever findings they have. But yeah, less lab based.
Yeah. So it's just out of curiosity, digital forensics and national security, that's not normally the everyday paths that people choose. So what kind of pulled you towards that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like my family is all in the arts, like in creative fields. And so I think it kind of came as shock to all of us, particularly me, because I transferred my major 3 or 4 times, went to a few different schools. I was in, project management for a little while, advertising, all these things. And I was like, nothing is hitting. Like, it's all great. It's all stuff that I feel like I know really well. I enjoyed doing it, but nothing that I was super excited about. And I had just a family friend who was like, well, what is the stuff that occupies your free time when you're not in school, when you're not, doing anything that you have to be doing necessarily? And I was like, yeah, true crime. Like, read every book, listening to every podcast, every docuseries, and just became like such a fascination and obsession for me that I was like, never had it cross my mind that was a field that someone actually went into in real life. And although it's not like the CSI shows and, all of the like Bones or whatever, gives kind of a similar thrill that I was feeling in kind of watching all of that stuff on my free time.
That's incredible. Well, just hearing all three of you talk about, where you are today, it's impossible not to think about the version that we first met back in a film. And we do have a couple of short clips that we'll play as you folks are talking about it. But I know for sure that when I met Brian, you and Sam several months back via Zoom, and then had a chance to work with you folks in April for the Deeper Learning Conference, it was definitely a shock for me. I mean, in the best possible way, to see you folks and all the changes and growth that you had been through, in those 10 years. And Scout, we just met backstage right before this. So I'm kind of still feeling that same emotion speaking with you. And I'm going to hazard a guess to say that all of our audience members are kind of experiencing the same thing, especially if they haven't had a chance to talk to you since, most likely. So my question to all of you, and maybe Brian, you can take this one first, is when you look back at yourself and most likely to succeed, what do you see now that you didn't have a chance to see then?
Uh, well, I hear something, and it's a much higher pitched voice. So there's that. Other than that, yeah, that's a great question. I feel like Scott kind of alludes to this. I think towards the end of the documentary, if I remember it correctly, like he was looking at me and he's like, "Come on, like you're making all these mistakes. How can you not see it?" But I had to like make those mistakes to learn and grow from them. So I think I understand Scott's perspective a little bit better watching it back, because I know the mistakes I've made and I know the things that I learned from it. So I think that would kind of be the biggest thing, is looking back and seeing myself make the same mistakes over and over again, and hopefully not as much since then.
Yeah. Sam, what are you thinking?
Yeah, this happened the last time. I think it was in April when I saw it in San Diego. And I think I have a problem that many other people do, is that when I'm doing a pretty good job, I can't tell while I'm doing said job. I'm usually freaking out and I think I'm doing really badly, and I'm panicking. And I remember watching this movie and being like, "Wow, I'm doing pretty well the whole time. I don't know why I was so stressed." And that's something that I've been trying to learn since college and I'm still working on is trying to realize like when I'm doing well in the moment so I can do more work with more joy, less stress.
Yeah, yeah. Scout, I'm gonna toss it back to you, but maybe give a slight twist on that question because we didn't get a chance to see any projects or things that you had been working on at the time. But when you think about yourself as a learner in 2015, and it was just a small clip, was that captured accurately on film, or do you think, man, that was just a snapshot in my life?
No, absolutely. I think, and I saw this comment on YouTube as well on how I made the decision to come to High Tech High. Well, I was in fourth grade, so really I didn't. My dad was basically like, this is where you're going because this is clearly not working for you. But that same feeling that I was feeling in that classroom still comes up for me in college with like more traditional learning styles that haven't been transferred fully, at least in a wide range, to universities. And I guess High Tech High truly changed my life. I started going there in fifth grade, and then I ended up leaving my sophomore year and going to college. And I feel like those, I don't know, 7 or so years just made me incredibly curious. And I think what you're seeing in that clip, and partially what I feel now occasionally in college, is just like a bit of that tampering of joy or curiosity that I think all of us inherently have within ourselves, but it's not tapped into in the traditional school learning system. And so High Tech High basically gave me the tools to like just say yes to everything and, you know, tap into that curiosity a little bit more. And especially when I look back on the projects I was doing at High Tech High, none of them made sense at the time for things that necessarily took part in my personality. Like, you know, if someone was asking, you want to go take a trip, an astronomy trip. I had no interest in stars, you know, I had no interest in astronomy, but you say yes to the trip. Or planting 50,000 or 50 trees, say yes to that trip. Or building a rocket in the Mojave Desert. All things I did within like the span of 3 years in high school. And none of them I initially had interest in. And now all of them have spiked curiosity for me, or at the very least, if they didn't, they were opportunities that led me to meeting like really, really great people and kind of gave me more curiosity and let me develop the skill to just say yes to more opportunities.
That's amazing. That actually leads into a question that one of our community members dropped for us, Annie in Virginia. And so I'm going to jump back to Sam first, then Brian, and then Scout. You kind of answered it, but if you have anything you want to add on, then you can do that at the end too. So Annie is asking, if you had the opportunity, what advice would you like to be able to go back and to give yourself 10 years ago?
10 years ago. So I'm 17. Oh man. I honestly, when I look back, I'm really happy with all the choices I made and how I listened to myself and what I pursued. I think I would just tell myself, you're doing okay, and just keep going and stop stressing out. And that kind of leads into like when I teach, one of the number one things I notice is how much pressure there is on high school students these days, maybe more so than when I was a high school student. And I think if I could go back to me and to a lot of other high schoolers, I would say, remember that it's not all about stress, that it's for your benefit as well. And you should find enjoyment in your learning. That's the best kind of learning. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like the biggest thing I'd want to hear from myself is like, stop stressing out, dude. Everything's okay. You know, like I feel like that would have helped a lot. And also I feel like prioritizing the right things. You know, when I once I left High Tech High, I went to UCLA. I went to film school. In the first 2 years, I was really, really disappointed. I had a major kind of whiplash because I would go to this giant public university and I have to do all these general education classes that I could not care less about, right? One of the great things for me about High Tech High is that once I discovered that I had this passion for filmmaking, every project that I ended up having with a teacher, with a team, I got to turn into a film project. And that was that that open mindedness that the school fostered was really helpful for me, and I got to be passionate about every project I was working on. And then I go to college and I'm taking like this random linguistics class that I just could not care any less about. And And so I ended up just not going to any of those classes, and I ended up not taking the finals, and then I ended up flunking out of school. But I made my way back, which is the important part. And I learned from that mistake. So I think one is prioritizing the right things. Like, you don't have to be passionate about everything, but don't be stupid. Like, at least show up for the final. You get like 40 points for putting your name in. So, at least show up. And then the other thing I would say is kind of what Scott was talking about earlier. I mean, at High Tech High, there were also a lot of projects that didn't initially interest me, but getting to turn them into film projects made me interested about the subject, and I learned a lot of stuff, a lot of random stuff. Like I still remember, Frida Kahlo and all these other random tidbits that are in my mind. And I feel similarly about college. I wish that I had gone to those classes because maybe I don't care about linguistics now, but maybe I would have cared more about it, back then if I actually went to class. And that's one of the things that the film professors were kind of telling us when we came in. And I was full of myself. I didn't think I had to listen to them. But they were saying, when you're going to make films, you got to make films about something, right? You need to have experienced some kind of life and you need to have learned some stuff. Otherwise, what are you going to make films about? And I didn't really take that as seriously. So I think that's one of the other big things I would tell myself is be more open-minded and don't be as focused on a singular thing. Expand your horizons as much as you can.
Yeah. Awesome. Scott, anything else to add to that?
Not much, just mirroring. Yeah, I agree. Don't focus so much on finding your niche. Like that's going to come naturally, and it's going to come way later than you think it's going to come. I was so stressed. Like my brother was such a great runner in high school, and I was like, I don't have that one thing that I'm so good at. And that was fine. It ended up being totally okay. So
there's a question in the chat that kind of speaks to finding enjoyment in a stressful school system. And it's actually from Larry Joswick talking to us under Prime World Digital Education. And he says, Sam, how do you find enjoyment from a stressful school system?
I saw that question. Yeah. You have to remember why you're here and what matters. And I think that's something that High Tech High did differently as well. I remember something my little brother said when he started at High Tech Middle, which was kind of a funny quote, was like, Mom, the teachers actually like care here, which I don't think he meant it the way it sounds. I think he just meant that like a lot of the teachers at High Tech High are actually like really enthusiastic nerds about what they're teaching and are actually obsessed. Like I actually am obsessed with mitochondria. It's a real thing. And so I think like when I teach, I'm not teaching the students like you need to know this so you pass the test and you're successful in life. I'm teaching like, look, isn't this cool the way your cell makes energy? I make it cooler than that. But like, I think that imparting what matters and why it matters to learn helps make it helps pop you from a stress bubble so then you can find enjoyment again in whatever catches your eye without stressing about a niche, like Scout said. That's what I would say.
Thanks. I hadn't actually planned on asking you folks about this, but it has popped up in the chat. And it's actually from Facebook right now, McKinley Walden School Eagle Cave trip. And they're asking, how has AI been or will be a part of the pathway that you've chosen? Anyone can jump. Well, Scott, I saw you raise your hand, so I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, I'm very pro AI, if you couldn't tell. That being said, like with the correct limitations, right? Like, especially if we're speaking towards high school students, like personally, I will never give any children that I have in the far future phones until they graduate, just because I grew up in that generation with the phone. So I understand, kind of the cons to doing that. But that being said, I'm also a college student where AI has kind of taken over learning, and it's an incredibly powerful tool. And I actually was listening to a podcast recently of a couple educators talking about how AI has been beneficial for their students in terms of how they decided to teach differently. And rather than giving your students, or I guess her students, a paper to write in English, she had them bring in their drafts in terms of what AI wrote for them. And then they were printed drafts in the classroom. She decided to ask her students to go through and mark where they think the AI bot could have had a corrected response to what they were given. And then based on that, now that they had the outline for the paper, they went back, AI assisted, wrote the paper, came back to the classroom as it was printed out, went through, marked it. And to me, I was just like, this is a great, resource that students can be using and will be using. And we can either lean into it or try to be catching students with bots and things that, make it more difficult. And I agree that I don't want students, or anyone for that matter, copying and pasting what's given to them in AI. But I think at an early age, if we're able to teach students that this is like something that can help organize their thoughts in a more, in the same way we're taught in a writing class how to write an outline, that now there's a tool that can do that very easily for you. I'm all for it. And in my work particularly, I can see in the next 5 years how expansive it'll be in the forensic science field, right? Because right now I'm combing through thousands of photos in weeks. That'll take me weeks. And now we're getting little pieces of AI that's able to sort through all images that have a certain color t-shirt, or just men or just women. And anyway, it's been incredibly helpful. And I think used correctly can really, really help students.
Amazing. Sam and Brian, before you jump in, there was another kind of related question. So I don't know if it's going to add to your answer or not, but it's from Nick Salmon. And he's asking, how might we recruit AI as a teammate with the ability to generate many more options than we might generate within our team? So that might add another layer to kind of what Scout talked about.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on AI. I think that it is a teammate to me because it really helps me code. It actually, since it's a language learning model, it can both write code and teach it to you. I get a little strict with chat, but I'll be like, break this down, and it will explain every line. And so that is kind of nice, specifically for code. But I tell my students, you have to remember that it's a language learning model. It's going to tell you, it's trained to tell you what you want to hear. And so Scout's right. Like, I've also used it similarly as a tool to do things way faster, way more efficiently. But then when you're asking questions that are more at the frontiers of knowledge, like when my students are just Googling like some biology fact really fast on chat, sometimes it's going to give you the wrong answer because like humans don't even know the answer to that yet. Or maybe the answer is a bit more nuanced, but chat's kind of giving you what you want to hear. So I think like when it comes to being able to use it as a tool, we just have to take the time to understand what it does and how it does it. So I agree with Scout, everything Scout said. There's pros and cons, and we just have to be smart about how we use it, I think. Yeah.
Brian, any thoughts coming from a creative lens? So it's slightly different than the science lens that Sam and Scout talked about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, coming from the arts, I'm in a Hollywood union, and so the main thing that I hear from people that are in the union I'm in and the leaders is, the thought that this would replace jobs or take over people's entire jobs, and then you need less people to make a movie. So that whole thing, using it creatively is something that does scare me a lot. But in terms of AI generally, I kind of have like three lenses to look at it through. So the first one is, as I mentioned earlier, I got kicked out of UCLA, but I made my way back. And the way I made my way back is I went to Santa Monica College, community college in LA, and I just did a whole semester there. And it was a lot more. I mean, it was very traditional, and I got straight A's there so I could get back to UCLA. One of the classes I took there was with this like really, really old timey professor. I mean, we walked into class, and the first thing he said is like, no phones. Okay, that's kind of weird for a college class, but that's fine. No phones. And then he said, no computers. And that really threw me off. And he said, for the next 2 hours, you each get notebooks. You're going to write on paper with pencil for 2 hours. And I hated this dude. I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, why are we going back to the Stone Age? This is so dumb. And like throughout the semester, it ended up becoming my favorite class. And the reason why was because we would just be forced to sit there with our thoughts. And he didn't care how much you wrote. He didn't even really care what you wrote. He just gave you a loose general prompt at the beginning of the class and said, write about it. And I did some of my best like therapy sessions during those classes, and it was really liberating. And so that first lens is, there are ways to, if you're an educator and you want to grade stuff, that's one way, right? You could just eliminate technology completely. That's one way to make sure that students aren't using AI, right? I don't know how useful it is, but that's one lens. The second lens I'd want to talk about is, I have a friend who was introducing a high school students to AI for the first time. They had never heard of it. They lived in an underserved community. They actually never heard of AI. And this student really, really wanted to become better at writing, but they didn't know how. And so my friend showed them how to use, AI, and they were a little worried at first, like, well, they're just going to use this like most students do today, and they're just going to copy and paste the prompts, spit out a paper, and then submit that, right? But what he ended up doing, which I thought was really interesting, is he uploaded the rubric that the teacher had for that class, for how they would grade a paper, uploaded what the statement is or the question is for the paper, and then wrote his own paper, and then told the AI to grade it for him as if though they were the teacher. And he just kept doing this until he got an A from the AI teacher, submitted that paper, and then got an A. And what's great about that is that again, I'm not saying that AI is like should replace educators, but I think that maybe in situations where you have 30, 40 students in a class and you can't give each of them an individualized attention, maybe this is one way. This student got feedback every time from the AI. Oh, you didn't mention this in your thesis, and you didn't do this, and they just got better at writing. So that's the second lens I'd want to look at this through. And then the last way, I think, is what Scout and Sam may be talking about a little bit more, is you can also just change your way of measuring progress. And I think the documentary touches on this a lot. Maybe it isn't important to fill out multiple choice questions. Maybe it isn't important to recall specific dates. Maybe it isn't even important to write a paper. I don't know. But maybe there are different ways to measure progress, understanding, success, that don't involve ways that AI can just do it for you. So those are kind of the three lenses I tend to look at it through. But I do love the idea of how Scout and Sam are using it to be more efficient. I think that's wonderful. I mean, if you can spend less time answering emails and more time, investigating plane crashes, like that's a lot better use of your time. But yeah, that's it.
Amazing. Well, I can't believe we're already, at the bottom of the hour. So since we're here, I want to take a very quick moment to update everyone on what School Could Be has for you in the works, our community. So first thing is on Wednesday, August 6th, we'll be kicking off a new season of Elevating Teacher Voice with host Jan Iwase and special guest Michael Nelson, who's a 40-year educator. He's been a teacher, a principal, a district leader, and Michael was actually, in fact, Washington State Superintendent of the Year back in 2019. So you can register to attend for free at whatschoolcouldbe.org/events. We also have our newest What School Could Be podcast episode featuring School of Humanities founder and CEO Raya Bidshari. Raya has built a model of education that blends purpose, agency, and global connection. So to learn more about Raya and the School of Humanity, you can listen to this episode anywhere that you get your podcasts. And as always, there's an open invitation to be part of our free global online community of educators. You'll be able to connect, exchange ideas, discover powerful stories that can inspire meaningful change in your own learning spaces. So please sign up for free at community.whatschoolcouldbe.org. And finally, we're very excited to announce that we have a new documentary coming out called Multiple Choice. For decades, America's data-driven College for All agenda has created a no-win choice for most high school graduates. Take on the risk and expense of college or work a low-wage job. But in an economically challenged Virginia community, one superintendent is demonstrating the immense power of career-based learning, not as a last chance resort for some, but as foundational for all. So please scan the QR code to sign up for more information on that release date, or you can go ahead to whatschoolcouldbe.org and take a look at our splash page over there to keep up to date. Awesome. So maybe for this next question, I want to start with Scout first, then Sam, then Brian. There is this section of Most Likely to Succeed, where the film kind of turns to parents and they ask, what are their thoughts about this sort of non-traditional model of education? And, understandably, some parents are reluctant to fully embrace it. They're cautious about it. Sam, that was including your mom too at the time, right? Initially. So you've all been immersed in deeper learning, and in many ways, you still are. So when you're thinking about your journey and your growth, what kinds of evidence of deeper learning do you feel that you carry with you all the time? And then to the parents and educators who are currently watching this right now, and they're kind of seeking proof of why authentic learning matters instead of something that's probably a little safer, more traditional, what would you want them to see in you?
That's a great question. One of the things I was pondering on when Sam was speaking is at least the way that I viewed project-based learning coming to High Tech High was for the students who couldn't do traditional learning, or like people who couldn't read out of a textbook. And that theory to me is completely debunked. And I think for most of you probably feel that way too, especially Sam, who's in science, a pretty traditional thing that's taught in most schools out of a textbook. And I guess the way that I say that is I just thought project-based learning was for visual learners, but I think all of us are visual learners. And although there are a small percentage of people that work really well out of traditional learning textbooks and lots of homework and testing and all of those things, the majority of us are not that way, regardless of whatever field that you're interested in or wherever, however your brain works. So I guess this is, for me, the way that I would answer that question is what High Tech High taught me is how to just use my brain in a more visual and creative way, even though I'm headed into a field that likely could have been answered by a lot of textbooks. And it taught me people skills. I think a lot of what my generation is lacking right now with both technology and kind of a low drive in education is people skills and being able to talk to people and create jobs and opportunities and to do well in a job interview. And I really don't mean to brag when I say this, but like I feel in my biased experience through going to High Tech High, like those were all things that I had a very easy time doing. My job interviews, I wasn't nervous about them. I wasn't nervous about speaking to adults. I wasn't nervous to go ask for an opportunity from a professor. And all of those things happened by talking to teachers and being on a first name basis with teachers at High Tech High and creating projects and things like that. And you don't get that in a school where there's a teacher standing at the top of the classroom lecturing to you and you don't have any personal relationship with them. So I guess out of all things, it would be that the normal adult experiences that maybe take a longer transition for traditional learning schools to teach. At least that transition was a lot easier for me coming out into the real world and having to get a job yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
It's so cool seeing you, Scout. It's so cool seeing, I have to say that. But then, yeah, I have to echo everything you said. I think also that's interesting because, like, I know the type of student I was before High Tech High. Like, if you put me in that scene where you were crying in the classroom, I would probably be like, I love this textbook too. This textbook is my favorite thing ever. Because I was one of those students where I think I liked to do well because I realized I could. You give me a task, I do it exactly how you said, I get an A, and I'm a good student and I'm doing well. And I realized that, like, what kids are learning is kind of how to do what is told of them, but you're not being taught how to do what you want to pursue. And so, I might have forgotten the specific question, but in terms of like the biggest, like, deepest learning I got from High Tech High is first how to determine what you want to do and what's going to make you happy. And then two, how to break that down into actually achievable steps. Because we would see our teachers present this huge project that seems impossible. And me, I would be like, that doesn't seem like a thing that I can just do and make sure I don't mess up, stress, panic, I'm going to get a B. Oh no, and then all of a sudden, throughout the semester, you see how you were able to complete it in small, achievable steps. You see how you started to care a lot less about the grade and more about what you were producing. And then you get to the end of it and you're showing off to all your parents and friends and you're like, yeah, I can do that. And I think that's kind of why we go out and the interviews feel easier and going after crazy job opportunities feel easier because we know how to break things down to do what we want. I don't know if that answered the question, but and then I do really want to quickly say I owe a lot of this to my mom because I think the number one thing my mom wanted for me was to find joy in school. She didn't want me to be stressed. She wanted me to be happy while I was learning. And so she has been looking into Montessori and project-based schools my whole life. And yes, she was scared when she got to High Tech High. Like, I'm always scared of everything I do, but I have her to thank for getting me there.
I will say when I had a chance to meet your mom back in April, I mean, she is amazing, Sam, and you could just tell, how much she loved you and how much she wants things to, to turn out well for you in your life. So, and she was obviously very supportive. Yeah, yeah. Brian, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think Scout and Sam explained it perfectly. I mean, it's the same thing. I think it's with High specifically, the focus and emphasis on soft skills has been invaluable. Like all three of us are up here. We have no problem speaking and presenting our ideas and our thoughts, our philosophies, and that's something that definitely came from at least my time at High Tech High and High Tech Middle. So soft skills, not being afraid of job interviews, that kind of stuff has been really useful. And then I would also say like the problem solving aspect of what we learned. I feel like no matter what project or problem is put in front of us, like we're not daunted by the task of trying to figure it out or trying to figure out a way to solve something or complete something. And I think for film specifically for me, the I remember growing up watching movies and TV shows. It was just magic, like it is for a lot of people, right? It's movie magic. You have no idea how it could possibly be made, but it exists. And then it's daunting to figure out how to make a film and what goes into making one. But I feel like that inhibition was severely removed by my time at Adsekai, because it kind of feels like you can do anything when you're there, and when you're focused on deeper learning and not just checking a box, then you're forced to think critically about the world and even about your place in it. And I feel like that opens a lot of doors.
Awesome. So not really a question, but I want to highlight a comment in the chat that Mark Lang is saying. Learning about yourself gives you confidence. And I feel like everything that all three of you have shared today really brings that home for sure. So right now, we're going to bring in Josh Rapoon, What School Could Be's executive director and host of the What School Could Be podcast. Back in January, Josh actually kicked off the 10th anniversary celebration by having a conversation with What School Could Be founder and most likely to succeed executive producer Ted Dintersmith, as well as most likely to succeed's director Greg Whiteley, who's also Scout's dad. So Josh is going to bring this 10th anniversary celebration full circle now. By asking what I know are his burning questions for Sam, Brian, and Scout. Here you go, Josh.
Wow. Thank you, Mel. Wow. Sam and Scout and Brian, I know it sounds cliche, but I'm starstruck. For 10 years, I have just been, the whole arc of my life changed in October of 2015 when I first saw Most Likely to Succeed. And it set me on a pathway to the three of you. I just want to share, it set me on a pathway to joy. And I am in the process right now as the executive director of What School Could Be. I have fun and more joy right now in the work that I'm doing than I've ever had before. And none of that would have happened without the film and without the three of you as the protagonists in this film. So I know, because we only have a limited amount of time, I want to come back to the multiple choice graphic in a little bit. But before I do that, I want to, there you go. I want to ask the three of you this question. Ted Dintersmith, the executive producer of Most Likely to Succeed, and Scout, your father, Greg Whiteley, who is the director of the film, they put together about 12 minutes at the beginning of the film that 10 years ago very accurately predicted where we are 10 years later of AI, of machine learning, of automation, of robotics, all of that stuff. And so my question to the three of you, and Sam, maybe we can start with you, is what does it feel like to have experienced 10 years of this age of acceleration? And I'm really interested in feelings, because we talk a lot, through about our heads and what's going on in our brains, but not as much about our heart. So Sam, I would love to know, starting with you, like, what is it of accelerated technology and AI and all that?
Well, number one, it's been intimidating because it's not something you grew up learning about in elementary school. So it's like, okay, I better learn all this computer stuff. What's going on? But then as I've focused on where I find joy and gotten more into my work, I'm more excited by what we can get done with it, specifically in the world of molecular biology, DNA biology. Like DNA is just a ton of strings of letters. So the advancement of technology, we can find out a lot more patterns a lot more efficiently. So I'm excited about it. But I'm also scared for the generations below me because, like I said, they have a lot more pressure put on them. Like things for them are a lot harder, certain milestones, than they were for us. And I want to make sure that with the advance of technology, we're also remembering all the human sides of why we do anything we do, and being careful. And I think a good way to do that is to focus on the joy, like we've been talking about this whole time, where we find joy in learning and producing. That's kind of the two sides of my take on that.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Focus on the joy and you'll get through the age of acceleration just fine. I love that idea. Scout, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel very similarly to Sam. So hope I'm just not mirroring what she's saying, but yeah, I am a little bit worried for people going into schooling, at least at the age that I was, because I feel like I kind of saw it developing and now it's developed and will continue developing even more aggressively. And so I think I just want teachers, and I hope this doesn't contradict what I was saying with AI earlier and that I'm pro AI. But I hope that we as teachers like get to hone in on the skills that can never be taught by a computer. Similar to what Brian was saying with his writing professor, Mr. Aguirre did that for me freshman year, who, sorry, the mower is going outside. I hope you can't hear that. But he did the play that was put on in Sam's class, I believe, in the movie. I also was in his class freshman year, but for a different project, not for the play. And he every day had us writing for 30 minutes in a journal, and still a skill that I have developed, and a habit that I've developed even now, as well as, checking the news and finding reliable sources. And, he would do CNN photos every Monday, which you guys might remember Sam and Brian from being in his class. But those are skills that maybe can be made easier by AI, but I want to really hone in on just the personality that we have within all of us, and that will likely never be taken from a computer. So I think the more that we choose to develop those, the better off we are.
Brian, my daughter and I were together in San Francisco a few months ago. We had a joyful afternoon in North Beach in the Italian part of town. And one of the things that we noticed, Brian, is that almost every other car in San Francisco is a Waymo. And it was a bit of a shock for us to see that many driverless cars. And so, I'm wondering, what are you thinking in terms of the last 10 years, this age of acceleration? And, maybe some comment from you about how fast things are going. And at times, does it feel too fast for humankind to assimilate from your perspective?
Yeah, the fantastic question. I've actually taken one of those Waymos in San Francisco and in LA. It's crazy when you get in there. It's scary the first time and then not so scary. Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like for me, the thing I try to be careful of is, every new generation is always, afraid of the new generation and what's coming up, and things are moving too fast. So I'm always trying to be like careful of not being too afraid or being afraid of change. But I will say that things do feel really fast. And even, my brother is still in college, and just like I never really had to deal with AI in school. So I feel like really lucky about that. But my brother's dealing with it right now, and I know a bunch of other people that are. And that's really scary, and it feels really fast. The other thing that scares me too is even just in this field of filmmaking. When I was in film school and I was shooting stuff, there was a pretty clear way you would shoot stuff. And although there were new cameras and new ways to edit, those are things you could learn and you could develop. And it was generally the same idea, just maybe more efficient. The thing that really scares me about generative AI is the idea, like I stay up at night a lot thinking about this. I mean, like I've dedicated all this time and energy and money and tears into this craft. Like, what if the craft doesn't really exist in a couple of years? Like, that's a really depressing thought. and I don't know what the answer is, and I'm pretty, freaked out about it a lot of the time. And then there's the other part of me that tries to be maybe, if not realistic, at least a little bit more optimistic. Like if anything does, like industries take a long time to change. I think generally, like it's not overnight. And also theoretically, if you're a good filmmaker, it doesn't really matter the tools. But as a person right now, like me and a lot of my friends are crew members on films and TV shows. So we rely on these things to actually shoot to make a living. And I don't know how many jobs would be left if all it takes is a few people behind a computer to make a movie rather than the thousands it takes today. So that part's scary. But I am more worried for people younger than me. But again, I'm not trying to, I know every generation faces something like this, but it does feel really fast, to answer your question, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. For a second, have you felt in the last 10 years, ever felt a moment where it was sort of like, yikes, maybe what I was headed towards might not be even a real thing in the future? Or do you feel pretty comfortable in higher education that's, what I'm asking there?
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that scares me too is, like, again, like industries and institutions take a long time to adapt. And so even if there is a future where, we're using AI or other tools in tandem with filmmaking, like the time for institutions to catch up is going to be a long time. And I feel like a lot of people are going to be left behind. And and to answer your question directly, the first part of it, like, absolutely. I mean, when the Sora stuff first came out from OpenAI, and even those, you had like puppies morphing out of other puppies, it looked really realistic, and it scared the crap out of me. Like, I just like stopped writing for a bit because I was like, what's the point? And you get this really nihilistic view of the world. But hopefully some stuff does translate. But again, I'm worried for the people that are like behind me or that are younger, because I don't know what the future looks like for them.
So you were gonna say, what are your thoughts from that higher education perspective?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry, my bad.
All I was going to say is I'm not worried for you, Brian, but continue. That's all I was going to say is I'm not worried for Brian. Continue.
Scout, have there been moments as you've moved forward on your journey where you have thought about whether or not whatever you're pointed towards is going to be real in the future, or that it might disappear in the age of AI and automation?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to highlight Mark's comment about him saying that there will still need to be human skill to give the right prompts to make really great movies. In Brian's case, like I think will be in my case as well. Part of what's really great in the criminal justice world right now is AI is able to now hear, say a police officer is doing just a routine traffic stop, rather than spending their time writing a report. AI is kind of listening to everything that the person they're pulling over is saying and writing the report for them automatically. And though this isn't anything that's being used now, it's something that within the next year or two should make at least being a police officer a lot easier. And although I don't want to be a police officer, I know a lot about writing way too much paperwork for things that are just should be done already by a computer automatically. So I guess I feel a lot of excitement in that sense, because it points you toward a lot of time that you're more interested in. And I don't necessarily think, at least in my career, hopefully, that the entire justice court system will be done by computers. I could be wrong, but at least I feel a little bit more optimistic about the field that I'm going into, because you need hands and eyes and places that can be there to take photos and give opinions on things that I don't think a computer can develop yet. But yeah, I guess a little bit nervous, but also excited for the opportunities that can create.
That's great. Mel, do we have time for me to? Oh yeah, go Sam,
Sorry.
go.
I just can't help it. There's a lot of talk of AI at my university as well. And I think it's important to know that AI gets everything from us. It stops at 2024 because it hasn't been updated, or is 2023? I forget. It hasn't been updated. And I don't do this myself, but I do mentor students who are training models and machine learning models and models that function the same way our brains do, to do crazy things like achieve quantum computing. Or it is getting really technical, but at the heart of it, it's always humans that are giving the prompts. And so I think that I believe that the generations younger than us, I'm worried too. It's going to be harder, but they're also going to have ideas that are going to knock our socks off. And I think they're going to be able to do a lot more with those ideas. That's all I have to say.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great perspective. Yes. Mel, am I okay with one more? I know we're right at the top. We're coming up to the top of the hour. Can do?
Yeah. Do one more. This is exciting.
Okay, so
I'm so interested in this conversation.
I know this is amazing. If we can bring up the multiple choice graphic again. So I'm just going to read this out loud for everybody. For decades, America's data-driven college for all agenda has created a no-win choice for most high school graduates. Take on the risk and expense of college or work a low-wage job. But in an economically challenged Virginia community, one superintendent is demonstrating the immense power of career-based learning, not as a last chance resort for some, but as a foundation for all. That's great. So just as we get to the top of the hour, to the three of you, and maybe Scott, we'll start with you. I just wonder that over the course of your time at High Tech High and in that very experiential environment, were there moments, and I think, Scout, you talked about this a little bit earlier, where you really felt like choice was something that was empowering you rather than have experienced in a regular high school? I mean, people could say, you got to go from biology to chemistry to history to English, and then maybe you get an elective. But at High Tech High and schools that are like that around the country, there is a ton of choice that you get. That choice is empowering. So I wonder if you could just share if there were moments where you were really clearly aware of that. And Sam and Brian, I'll come to you with the same question.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Something I find interesting about my time at High Tech High, and I sometimes wonder if this was because of the director that we had at the time, or if this was kind of the High Tech High system as a whole. But if I showed up to class, no one knew. And like if I didn't show up to class, no one knew or honestly cared if I was there, other than my team that I was directly working with. So like I think putting that choice on the students, and I guess a healthy type of pressure to show up for the people that you're working with in order to create a really great outcome was important to me even as a high schooler. Where that gets tricky is under the wrong kind of direction, right? Like some high school students are not going to make that choice. And so there does need to be a little bit more pressure or structure around those students to kind of, for them to see, I guess, the positive sides to showing up to class and what they can create and building that confidence in themselves. But I think that choice was like liberating to me. At least there were times, I'm sure, in my High Tech High career that I chose not to show up to class, when I was being a punk of freshman year high school. And I'm sure that there was times where I consistently went and showed up for my team and saw the kind of excited outcomes that could have for me. And over time, like, I think that choice ended up serving me well. I think over time, I chose to hopefully do the right thing and show up to class for my teammates. So I don't know. Yeah. I think just partner-based working is something that we all deal with in the adult world. And those are choices that we make, whether we want to show up to work or not. And that did me a lot of good in high school. So I'm grateful for that choice. Yeah.
That's awesome, Scott. I love the wisdom of choice with structure, so that the choices actually have meaning. That's really beautifully put. Sam, what about you? Were there moments where you just felt like, wow, this choice is empowering to me? It's giving me something I didn't necessarily have before?
Kind of the opposite. I shop at Trader Joe's because there's less choice and I get less overwhelmed. There's only 1 or 2 brands of everything. And that way there's less ways that I can mess up. And I think that that's how I saw school at the time as well. All the choice, it's scary. It means the way I see it is there's more opportunity to mess up. And I was so terrified of messing up. So one, High Tech High taught me that failure is, of course, how we learn and necessary and great in many ways. But then 2, it taught me how to not freeze up when I have a ton of choice and how to navigate choice in a way that's best for me. And I'll just plug the class that I just taught. I know that my students were really, really overwhelmed in the beginning because I didn't give them a super clear prompt. I didn't say, do this, do this, do this, and then you'll finish the class. I said, you have to find your hypothesis. You have to figure out what the question is that you're going to ask. That itself is your project, is figure out the question. And I found that was way more stressful for them in the beginning. And then when they figured it out and they had a question they were passionate about, first, they had ownership of that question because they found it themselves through all the noise. And then second, they felt good that they could answer it. So High Tech High taught me to not be scared of choice and how to navigate choice, which you're going to be faced with in life no matter what.
And I think, Sam, what's really special is that Brian Delgado and Mark Aguirre made a choice essentially with you to be the director of that play. And that kind of set you on a path, right? It became part of your journey, part of your story, which is really special. So that's like super cool. So Brian, your thoughts on a moment where choice really had an empowering effect on you?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, but it's a little more general, but just the ability to make the choice, no matter what project we were doing, to be able to make it into a film project, whether it was the Revolutionary War or something in biology. I found that incredibly empowering, and it helped me develop my passion. And I love that all the teachers were usually pretty cool with it. And yeah, so that was one thing I think that really helped me feel empowered. But to go to Scout's point, actually, about like, if you don't show up, it's not that big of a deal. I think like framing that way is kind of funny, but it is true. And the thing that I really appreciated was being able to kind of control my own time and feel the repercussions of it if necessary. Because again, like, it didn't matter if you show up to class or not for attendance. What mattered is if you don't show up to class and you're not doing the work with your team, then your team's going to suffer, and then your project's going to suffer. And that's a real tangible, real world, example of what'll happen after you're out of school, outside the protection of high school. I remember one of the things I mentioned earlier was when I was at San Marcos College with that teacher that made us write for 2 hours, right? I remember one of the things I wrote about, because it was on my brain. I was working at the time at the business school at UCLA, and I was editing videos for the business school. And I remember that I would be getting paid by the hour, and I gotten really fast at editing, so I'd finish these edits a lot sooner than the time I was allotted, right? So for me, I'm like, oh great, I can dip and like go shoot my own stuff. And my boss was like, no, you got to stay here. And I was like, and do what? And he's like, I don't know, but you got to stay here. And that, I remember that really pissing me off as a young college student. So I remember writing about that in one of my papers in that class when I was just meditating. I was like, I didn't understand the concept. I was like, are you paying me for me to do this work, or are you paying me for my time? And that's the thing that I didn't really understand. And I feel like, especially coming from High Tech High, that kind of weird way that a lot of our corporate world kind of works was made really apparent there, because it didn't matter. I didn't have to go to class every day. I wanted to, because I wanted to see my friends, but I could leave my class and go help another friend of mine in Adobe Illustrator in a different class and come back and finish my work later, or finish it first. And anyway, all that to say, like, having that choice early on, I feel like has really helped me in my field right now of filmmaking, because I get to decide what I do and when, all knowing that it's at the expense of the final product or of my teammates.
That's awesome. And before I throw it back to you, Mel, I just want to say it feels to me like these three have been hanging out every day together for 10 years. There's just that feeling that jumps off of the screen, right? Three friends. And it just makes my head and my heart happy. So thank you to the three of you, and I'll hand it back over to Mel.
Thanks, Josh. So as we come to the close of this conversation today, I just want to pause and honor this moment. I mean, 10 years ago, we saw you folks as, teens and preteens. And, today there's actually a comment in the chat from George Tang that I think sort of encapsulates everything. And he says, with young adults like you, our future generations will be in good hands. And I love that so much. I have one final, maybe one sentence question to throw it out to you folks. Knowing that you all have carried this torch of Most Likely to Succeed for 10 years, imagine yourself kind of passing that torch over to the educators to share with their students that are in their classroom now. And if you want to tell them, here's one thing that matters most to making this kind of learning possible, what would you tell them to do tomorrow? Anyone can start. Scout, I see you unmuted. You want to
Yeah,
jump?
I think I'll just say, if I were a teacher in your positions, first of all, I'm sorry because you're going through a lot of changes, but keep your students curious and teach them to ask really good questions and to say yes to opportunities as they come.
Thanks, Scout.
Love that.
Sam?
Yeah, honestly, I just immediately think of Brian and Mr. Geary and how they saw something more in me than just my papers and whatever I was submitting. They like cared about me as a human, and I still talk to them, and I think that made all the difference to like the depth of my learning during high school, was that they really cared about me as a person.
Awesome. And
Wow,
Brian, we
love
ended
that.
with you in most likely to succeed. So you have the last piece of voice here in our big think.
Hopefully, I don't turn it in late this time. Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is passion. I think that a teacher like Scott, created this project around his passion. He wanted to learn how to use this laser cutter. He's a physics teacher. He wanted to do all this gear stuff, and that passion was incredibly contagious. And the best teachers I've ever had are always the ones that are passionate about what they teach. I know that isn't always possible if you have a rigid curriculum, but if there's a way to find passion, like your students will always notice it, and I think always appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. What a way to end.
That's
Josh,
awesome.
thank you for being the color commentator today, helping me close out this 10-year anniversary of Most Likely to Succeed. Sam, Brian, Scout, thank you for just being so vulnerable and sharing all your thoughts and your growth over these past 10 years, and just sharing some ideas for our educators to make a real difference in the lives of our learners now. And to our community and everyone watching, we really do appreciate you being a part of this 10-year journey with us. Have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. Thank you for celebrating. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.